Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Sword Art Online 2 episode review. This one's going to be for episode 17, Excalibur, the last episode of the Excalibur arc. 303 of course. And yeah, this is a fairly to-the-point episode. It basically plays out exactly as you expect it to, with the only real kind of surprise being that Freya turns out to be Thor, and that's a kind of big part of the quest. And I assume the idea in the game is that you could have just faced the boss on your own, but it would have been crazy difficult to defeat him on your own. But if you had done the compassionate thing and saved Freya the prisoner before, it allows you a much easier time during the fight. And again, just plays into the whole idea of kind of they're asking the players to kind of think and be involved more in the quest than just what you'd usually expect from like an RPG quest in the video game. But yeah, it's still a good episode despite being somewhat predictable and to the point. The fight plays out pretty well in that. I was kind of expecting it to be more of a kind of set piece fight where we didn't really get to see a lot of attacks go in, and it's mainly just like they're completely outmatched. Something happens and suddenly they win. But I like the way that they did it where like that they for the most part they could get his first health bar down relatively easy. Freya really helped with that, and then the second health bar, the change of attack pattern, they all got frozen, took a lot of damage. They had to rely on Asuna a lot during the fight, but they eventually kind of made their comeback, and Freya revealed that they had to find Mjolnir, which cleverly they do because Lifa realizes that, oh, if we're dealing with Freya, Norse mythology, gold hammer, it must be Mjolnir. So she's just like, use a lightning attack to try and find it. And they do, and we get to reveal that Freya is in fact Thor. It's a kind of a weird reveal in that it just kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't really know my Norse mythology that well, but it's a kind of weird transformation. But I suppose the idea they're going for was that the frost giant took Thor by surprise, stole the hammer, and Thor, to kind of escape, transformed himself into Freya and kind of went undercover to find a way to get the hammer back eventually, which is the whole idea of the quest. But then Thor basically helps distract the frost giant king Thrymr, and basically it's a Thor and the fairies versus Thrymr to kind of end it all. The fight ends then fairly quickly, and Klein gets the reward of Mjolnir, a legendary weapon, as kind of, I suppose it's meant to be this kind of bonus quest reward, that if you actually stopped to save her, that only then could you possibly get the reward of Mjolnir. And so because Klein was the one being compassionate and wanted to go back for her, he got the reward. I liked the little bit of focus they gave him on that front, that he earned the weapon, but it's Klein, so nothing goes his way. It happens to be a weapon type that he can't really use and kind of is against kind of the character he's going for. But it's just something of note that he also has a legendary weapon, and I'd sort of wonder, like, if in future content in SAO, if we ever get a moment where he reveals that, yeah, I've trained up a little bit in hammers so I can use this, or just I've upped my strength level so I can use hammers as well. It'd be a cool thing for just on another quest for like they're really struggling, even Kirito with Excalibur is struggling, and then out of nowhere Klein just pulls out Mjolnir and just like electrocutes someone. That would be a cool little reveal, but it seems like a bit of a waste if it's just a kind of jokey thing that Klein has a legendary weapon he can't use. But I like that they specifically played a little bit of focus on Klein, and then they paid it off very nicely. And then after that, they very quickly get into the next room. They have Excalibur, Kirito pulls it out, but in doing so, it kind of ends up kind of starting the destruction of basically the kind of place where they are. In basic terms, what is happening here is that removing the sword kind of removes the separation that had occurred, that Jotunheim was the way it was, an ice world, because it was separated from the world tree. But Kirito removing the sword allows the world tree to kind of grow back into Jotunheim, and just that causes some destruction and stuff like that. And that's probably where the most interesting part of the episode happens, is that Tonki returns to save everyone, but Kirito's item hasn't yet kind of registered as kind of being like earned from the quest. So he kind of realizes that to get out of here, he has to throw the sword away. And, it's just an interesting thing where they did the whole quest at the start to get this thing, but they're kind of happy now just being able to save the game, and he's willing to put, basically throw away this really rare item because of the experience that they had and stuff like that. So, interesting enough, but then Sinon steps up and she gets her big moment, and she uses her archery skills enhanced with magic to basically kind of the idea here, kind of magic version of tying a rope to an arrow, and grabs the sword and hands it over to Kirito as everyone is left shocked. And you get the funny little kind of shipping moment of just Sinon going like that. Okay, I gave this to you, but you can keep it on one condition. Think of me every time you draw the sword. And it's just, it's one of those lines that's just like, I know why this is in there, for like just a little joke, the kind of, haha, you guys think everything is shipping with all the girl characters and Kirito in the show. This is just one time we're drawing attention to that. But because it's such a common criticism sometimes that people bring up of the show, it's just kind of like, you didn't need to do that. You could have just done something to show the friendship between kind of Kirito and Sinon, which I think ultimately is the end goal of this scene, but do it in a less shipping type way, where Sinon does that and like maybe gives it to him as like a thank you for helping her during the GGO incident, and thanking him for basically being the one who has introduced her to this group and has allowed her to have such close friends. They could have done something really interesting as a way to link it into the GGO arc, just in terms of the fact that Sinon is now a member of the group, rather than just doing the very simple, like, haha, shipping joke thing. But it is what it is. Kirito has Excalibur now, and again, it's another weapon in the game where, like, I'd be really interested to know where he uses it. I know he's involved in a fight in the next arc at some point, but last time I watched these episodes, I don't quite remember if he uses Excalibur in those episodes. So I'm going to be interested to see what goes on there. Either way, just the fact that, two of our characters have legendary weapons. Sinon has mentioned that she is after a legendary bow. There's definitely a lot of potential to do other little arcs like this at some point, so that's interesting. Final scene to talk about is just some of the last few scenes. It's basically just the kind of celebration party that they have at the Dicey Cafe. But before that, probably one of the more interesting scenes as well, this idea that Kirito mentioned at the very start of this arc, that he in school is taking a mechatronics class, and he mentioned this a little bit in the ALO arc as well, I think, and no, it's Sword Art Online Extra Edition, I think, as well. He mentioned this, just this idea of him being very interested in mechatronics. No, it's a GGO arc, not ALO, sorry. And yeah, so we get the kind of results of his kind of early kind of tinkering around with this, in that he's basically building a technology to allow Yui to kind of inhabit the real world as well. So the idea that he's going for here is that he obviously has his computer connected up to the internet, and he has this camera in the room as well as a microphone. And the idea being that Yui's kind of connected up through all of this, and even though she's not physically there in the room, to her, it is like she is kind of moving around the room because of the way the camera and the microphone work. She can hear what's going on in the room, and she can see it through the camera and stuff like that. It's a very interesting concept in general, in that ultimately he's made this his kind of career path because he kind of wants a way to kind of get Yui in the real world in a way. And I think that's really interesting. I think Kirito and Asuna even talked about this a little bit, and he said he'd make it a reality one day. And I just like that Yui is not just some random character that was in those first couple of episodes she was introduced in. She has now become this kind of such an important character to Kirito, Asuna, and the group in general. You know, you even see kind of Silica and Asuda there kind of talking with Yui a bit as well. So she's an important part of the group as well. And Kirito just wants to, kind of cares enough about her to want her to interact in the real world, not just in the virtual one. And you know, I like the line from Yui where she just says, "You're spoiling me, Daddy," and stuff like that. Just that she is aware of kind of the effort that Kirito has to go through to make this happen, but it shows how important she is as a character to the other characters, and that makes her all the more interesting to me. And it's something that we obviously get kind of continuing, that links into what happens in the next arc, with Yuki and the Sleeping Nights and stuff like that. It's interesting how like this arc kind of continues stuff on from the GGO arc, basically Sinon being integrated into Kirito's group of friends, and then sets up the next arc a little bit with this idea of technology kind of helping, you know, to bridge the gap between the two worlds. But yeah, Excalibur arc, you know, overall, as I said before, I'm not going to do a separate video covering my thoughts on the Excalibur arc as a whole. The videos over the past 3 days have covered most of my thoughts. I don't think it's the best arc because it is just one quest, but given that it is just one quest, it's pretty interesting in terms of the intensity they managed to put into this situation, that the fate of the game is on the line, that it's this... I think what made it so interesting was them specifically bringing up that ALO is one of the only games out there that is a direct copy of the Cardinal system that made SAO. So that made this quest all the bit more interesting because it was kind of generated from like other information, and the game was smart enough and kind of intelligent enough to make this quest that would kind of destroy the game. And that made the characters want all the more to succeed in this quest because they would have lost this game that means so much to them if they'd failed. So that made it intense. And then I think the overall huge positive I would have to say about this episode, this arc in general, is just getting to see the all these characters interact. It's not just Kirito and Asuna. It's not just Kirito and Lifa. Not just Kirito and Sinon. It's all of those characters plus Klein, plus Lisbeth, plus Silica, and so on. You get the whole group basically all together. Eagle was the only one who wasn't there, and they kind of explained why he wasn't. And that's interesting, just because Klein hasn't had a lot of focus, really. Silica, Lisbeth, same. And just seeing that they are all honestly really close friends, and they do play this game together all the time, that they're basically a guild without being a guild. And I like that. So they're my final thoughts on the Excalibur arc. Probably, I'm going to try and get probably one episode review for the Mother Rosario arc out this week. It'll probably be Saturday or Sunday, but it could be Monday, just depending on how busy things get. So just be aware of that. Either at the very latest, I will start the Mother Rosario reviews next week. But yeah, that has been my review for episode 17, Excalibur. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the review and the episode. Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and bye.